All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Telivy MSP podcast. Very, very excited to introduce our guest today. Jared, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Jeremy. I'm happy to be here. My name is Jared Epstein, and I am the head of sales or director of channel for Timus Networks.
Awesome, awesome. And for everybody, hello, I'm Jeremy, head of partnerships at Telivy. We're an automated cybersecurity risk assessments platform for over 100 MSPs. MSPs like Halt Data Solutions, Triad Networks, and Level 5 Management use Telivy to run risk assessments to win new clients and monitor existing clients, and have all given Telivy 5-star reviews. MSPs love Telivy because MSPs reduce risk assessments that take 7 to 8 days manually to under 5 hours. All right, so let's jump right in with Timus. Jared, could you tell us a little bit about Timus?
Yeah. So Timus in itself is we're I'll stop and say this. Our brand awareness in the US is growing. I've been with the company for just a few months. My experience in the channel derives from Datto, pre-IPO, early 2019 is when I joined there. But Timus itself, we're a channel only 100% dedicated to MSPs, SASE vendor. And I know that could be pretty broad. What that really means for us is our DNA is built on firewalls. We have a sister company that's based out of Europe that's also channel focused only, where they have 15,000 partners, a million endpoints covered, and they actually build on-prem firewalls. So a little bit about Timus is about a year and a half ago, that team decided to build a 100% cloud-based solution for MSPs for the US market. And different from some of the other solutions that are out there that really start with like the VPN alternative, ours is really focused on that cloud firewall functionality, and multi-tenancy, free onboarding, free NFRs for MSPs. We're really enjoying the ride because there's so many vendors in the space, and everyone's fighting for that market share.
Very, very cool. And most of the folks here are technical, but just for anybody who doesn't know, can you explain what cloud firewall means? I think most people understand. Oh, I have a computer or a laptop. I have a firewall on that computer. But maybe like end business clients, could you help them, understand what cloud firewall means?
Yeah, thank you for asking that because
Hmm.
so like when you think about a traditional office, right, you have your server room, you have your firewall, and everything kind of stays contained within there. With workers working from anywhere, not just being remote, but I take my laptop home every day, either traveling remote or hybrid. Having a connection or secure connection from anywhere is really what started with this and what started the cloud firewall idea. And so Timus and the other SASE vendors out there have points of presence, is what we call it, which are data centers around the world in different locations where users then connect in through an encrypted traffic. And with Timus, these gateways, as we call them, have a private static IP. And a good reference point for like an MSP, for example, is your techs are probably on the road. If you're going to see a client, they're working from home that day, or they're just out and working on the day to day of an MSP. You can You can whitelist that IP address, lock down your RMM and your PSA tools internally, while also having an IPsec tunnel maybe into that office infrastructure that's sitting on prem.
And then also, in layman's terms, could you help us understand the difference between the cloud firewall and the VPN? I think most people understand, oh, a VPN helps me, connect to a place as if I'm coming from another place. Yeah, can you help us understand the
Yeah,
difference?
that's a great question because when you think VPN, it's just virtual private network, and like whether it's Nord
Mhm.
that's on my phone before I started working here. I mean, the the VPNs, when you think about SASE, is not a traditional VPN because it's not going into a piece of hardware. It's really all about that gateway, that cloud firewall, and the actual agent that's living on the endpoints is required to actually have that secure tunnel into the gateway. So if you think about that office network, but then we expand with users everywhere, then the industry phrase or the buzzword phrase is a software defined perimeter. And that agent, okay, like VPN alternative, is really the key to accessing into that gateway from a secure manner, whether it's via device posture check or a slew of security requirements to actually enter into that software defined perimeter. I like to refer to it as kind of like security at the airport before actually entering in. But that's that agent that's giving you that secure encrypted connection into those gateways, or as we like to say, cloud firewalls.
Very interesting. It sounds a lot more secure, like there's more checks in place. To protect users. So I know we got really technical there.
Yeah.
You're head of sales. Sales is your focus here. I want to talk a little bit about the business. You mentioned that so Timus. the North America branch is fairly new. So could you tell us a little bit about the story of the company? So are they based in Europe? You mentioned Europe earlier.
Yeah, so our global headquarters is in Boston and Cambridge. The story of the company, so they started building on-prem firewalls, I think 8 years ago to be specific. Have gained 15,000 partners in Europe. When building out this SE solution, the idea was, okay, let's bring this to the US. So this is not available in Europe. Let's bring this to the US. Bring in the CEO for the world, the global CEO, and one constant between Europe and the US part of the company is that we only work with MSPs. So that was
Hmm.
on launching this was we're not going to deviate from the channel only model, different product, but we're going to have the same customer base. Um, our resources, so our headquarters are in the US, based out of Cambridge. I'm personally in New York. And we have employees all over the US, including support, engineering, and we're continuing to build that out as we gain more and more partners. And I know that my title has I guess, a sales role associated with it, but part of why I enjoy working in the channel so much is that it's really about partnerships. And that was something that I learned in my days at Data was that to have a successful sales relationship with an MSP is having that partnership, and it's enabling them through technology, it's enabling them through marketing and MDF. Like there's so many layers to it, but it's not selling to them, you're selling with them. And that's
Yep,
something that I really enjoy.
I 100% agree. All of these business relationships, right? They're partnerships. We help each other grow. We add value in a way that helps them grow their business as well, win more clients or serve their existing clients better. So I'd love to understand MSPs themselves have a sales process. They have a once they got a customer, they have a service process, right? Over time, especially managed services. Um, where does Timus fit in the MSP's sales cycle or in their operations? Where does Timus fit? How do MSPs use Timus?
That's a good question. And I think it's not always a singular answer because the whole SASE segment is somewhat of a new segment. And I like to compare it to early 2019 when I'd speak to an MSP and they'd be like, "Oh, we're going to the cloud." And I would say, "Well, what does that mean, right? Like for you, what does that
Yeah,
mean, right? Are we talking about SaaS applications? Are we talking about hosted servers in AWS, Azure, et cetera?" Um, and, and the reason I mentioned that we have MSPs coming to us saying, like, we know we want to go into this direction for a multitude of reasons, whether it's for compliance or just we don't want to use on-prem VPNs anymore. Our servers just aren't there. We don't even have a firewall on-prem. Um, but to answer that question directly, depending on the use case, sometimes it's if they've adopted it early and it's a new client, it's going to be part of that bundle, that per user model. And we have other scenarios where they come to us and they bring it on, and it could be derived from a compliance need or just a specific use case where they're actually going back and asking for more money. And I also have seen certain scenarios where it is tucked into that per user model, right? That per user billing cost based on what it is right now. I prefer to have, it's more enjoyable when everyone's winning. And I'm sure it's
yeah,
still, but if they can go back and can ask for, a cost above. But
very
where does it
interesting.
fit in the stack? If you have users that are working from anywhere, so even if they're in the office, but they have laptops leaving the office, it should be included,
Very
whether
interesting.
remote, hybrid,
Yeah,
or
remote work. Yeah, I mean, like remote work is everywhere now, right? Everybody's doing remote work or hybrid work at least. And I believe it's wise for businesses to plan to at least have that capability, even if they're all in person, right? Have that capability. We all saw what happened in 2020, right? And what happened to companies who weren't prepared with cloud and remote access and communications, and to be able to and have that IT to be able to continue working. Very interesting. So you mentioned something earlier, so it could be used when the MSP wins that client, right, as part of that offering package, as well as when the client wants to move into the cloud, right? This is where Timus comes in too. I want to focus on the first part here. So, um, you know, you as the MSP using Timus, what is the additional value prop that you use to sell the end client?
yeah, there's several to this, and I think I'll start with vertical specific because I think all like in my time in the channel, I think compliance has become more and more of a part of the daily conversations, right? Being able to meet compliance, being able to be compliant within your cybersecurity insurance agreement, right? Being able to check those boxes. And if it's insurance, healthcare, medical, anything that really has to meet FINRA, HIPAA, some of the most common ones that we hear, that's usually again a top focus, a top point that comes up immediately. Like we need this to be HIPAA
Mm,
compliant. Because of the AES 256-bit encryption, our SOC 2 ISO certifications, making sure that the right people are accessing patient data or privileged data at the right times in the right manner. In terms of other components, I think it starts with that first question of how are your users accessing corporate data when they're not in the office, whether they're traveling, whether they're home at night. So that's what opens up the door to the conversation, because oftentimes they'll say conditional access or this quick answer of like we don't know, like we just
yep,
are.
yep.
Then that's where the conversation starts.
Yeah.
If using a legacy VPN, and there's the educational component of the difference of ZTNA and a legacy VPN, or just the pure educational focus of how you should lock down your resources for users who are, again, while they're working from home or just working from anywhere.
Interesting. I asked that because it's interesting. You and I, Timus and Telivy sort of live in a similar ecosystem, but we all contribute a different piece of the puzzle. And I love the idea that, oh, Timus helps with compliance, right? Oh, we have a compliance issue, we have a compliance vulnerability, access vulnerability, right? Use Timus to solve it. Telivy is, I think before that, our MSPs use Telivy to run automated risk assessments to find the compliance vulnerability, to find the access vulnerability, to find, oh, this is the compliance regulation that you need to follow, and here's what you need to do. Use Timus. So we should work together. We should
Would
tag
love
team
that. I think
this.
strategic partnerships in the channel are key,
Yep.
whether it's for MSPs or for vendors themselves. I mean, it's
Absolutely. And I'd love to dive into your philosophy of partnerships. You mentioned earlier, right? You don't approach this selling anybody, but it's more, hey, let's partner, let's help each other out. Let's see what value we can add to each other. I'm curious, a day in the life of Jared, you know, how do you look for MSPs? Who do you look for, right? How do you know that, oh, there's something here, there's a partnership here? How do you identify that? And then when you start talking, how do you talk to them? How do you get in touch with them? How do you meet? Where do you meet at my conferences? And then how does that relationship look? Like if you could simulate that for us, like, oh, what's entering a partnership with Jared look like?
sure. And I'll give you and the viewers some insight into like a day in the life at Timus, like in the internal conversations, right? What does our process look like in terms of onboarding, I'd say, a partner? And I'll say it starts with outreach, whether it's inbound or outbound. But ultimately, it's a demo, and during that demo, we're not trying to sell. It's just, is this checking the boxes of something that you maybe want to like to use? And it's for an MSP. It's a question I ask is like, how do you restrict access to your RMM and PSA tools for when your users are out of the office, right? Just a simple question like that. Can you whitelist the static IP that would be provided from Timus? Because we give free NFRs. And why I mentioned like the free NFRs and all of this in general is because the end of the call, if everything goes well, the next step is for you, the MSP, to get their hands on it themselves. And the question of how is someone a good fit? Ideally, it should be an MSP that's exploring the idea of this now. I think it's important for all vendors to note that I've learned over the years that there's truly a cost to bringing on a vendor of any sort. If you're allocating a resource internally to evaluate a tool or multiple tools, and putting a sheet together as to value props according to each tool and why, that's costing the MSP owner money that they're paying. It's a cost to evaluate. So if it fits the box, we'll set up a POC check and setup call, and we will give an MSP anywhere from 14 days to 3 months to evaluate the solution internally. And we'll do a guided onboarding, make sure everything is configured properly, go through the integration with their sign-on provider, whether it's Active Directory, Azure, Jump Cloud, et cetera. And then from there, we'll do check-ins periodically, make sure that everything is going well. If an MSP says, hey, the next step for us is let's get the technical win, because we can't talk about anything sales related until you say to us, hey, like we would like to use your solution to some capacity, whether
Yeah.
internally or customers. And then at that point, that's where the true enablement comes in, where the real partnership comes into play, because there's so many variables at the MSP's day, right? So it's how do we enable you? Do you want to deploy this to all of your clients? Is there a segment that you would think would be perfect for it? Do you want us to help with marketing? It's really about at that point, how can we help you? Whether pricing, enablement, marketing, coming on site to do technical training, that's really where our jobs come into play next. I hope that
Very,
answers the question.
very cool. I have two questions. One jumping back to when you when you were asking these questions to the MSP, I was curious, are they the same questions that that MSP would ask the client, right, just to make that sale or upgrade?
I think yes and no.
Hmm.
And over the years, as I've worked with technology, initially when I was with my dad, I would be like, what are you talking about? What are you selling? And it was, I would I'd bring up disaster recovery as like a backup generator, right? I think when you talk about network security for people who are not proficient in technology, it kind of really goes over the head. So to answer that question directly, I don't think so because dumbing it down for or simplifying it for the end user, I think is a different conversation,
Hmm.
especially for a business that doesn't have internal IT.
100%. How would you help the MSPs communicate that to the end client? Is there some sort of like a support document or tips or guideline or oh here's like a template that you could use like yeah additional support like that?
Yes, and so we have there's reporting, and so the whole I think like any tool, if it's easier for anyone to sell something if you're already using it. So
Yeah.
oftentimes you can pull up and be like, hey, look at the reports I'm pulling, and I think it depends on the business owner, because some business owners are really obsessed with productivity, right? Whether their users are in the office or remote, and we have a function that based on each user, it has a tab that shows productive, unproductive, based on the sites and apps they're going to, how much time they're spending on it per day, and you could toggle back and forth. So if it's an owner that's obsessed with how many or focused on how many hours a day are my employees really working, what does that look like? Are they accessing the right resources during the time that I'm paying for? They can print out a report for that. If it's a really paranoid, security-minded business owner who's just really scared of having a breach, talking about the encryption, talking about the cloud firewall that's segmenting access to resources through, again, the different layers of encryption, but simplifying that. And we do have white papers and co-brandable material that
Mm,
can talk about it in a manner that for someone who doesn't necessarily know what AES 256-bit encryption is and some of
very
the
very
lingo
cool.
used on the call. So to answer that directly, I think it depends on the business owner, but we will enable them with marketing material or speak to them directly.
Absolutely. And something that I've found speaking with MSPs and getting to know them, because, when you try to partner with them and try to um, understand if they're a fit, I have to understand, okay, so, what is this person's day to day? What is top of mind, right? What's their top concerns or worries? What do they care most about? Oh, it's getting the next client, or oh, it's helping this existing client right now, or and I'm curious for you specifically, I guess, who, what are your customers like? What's your customer persona like? What do they care about? What do they think about most? What are they worried about? What are some of their day-to-day pain points? I'm curious.
And is this for the MSPs or for the end users as well?
For
Or
the
maybe
MSPs, the people you work with, and you like the type of understanding and learnings that you've learned talking to your customers, yeah, your partners.
so from the MSP perspective, and it ranges, right? This is why I
Yeah,
love MSP. We could speak to a four-person shop that has 5,000 endpoints, that just runs really lean and mean. And
yeah,
then we
yeah.
could speak to, an MSP that has like up to 50 people internally. I'd say and I like to bucket because every MSP also from an onboarding a vendor standpoint has a different evaluation process based on how mature they are from how many layers of infrastructure internally, by infrastructure, human infrastructure. But I'd say our sweet spot is anywhere from a one-man shop up to 50 people internally, based on what we've seen thus far. Really, I'd say the bulk of our customer base being, and I'll take it away from the amount of people internally to really the amount of endpoints, and somewhere between I'd say 1,000 to 10,000 endpoints under management, and users that are really looking to stay within like what's next in this segment, right? When it comes to cybersecurity, in terms of the persona, we're usually speaking with a CISO, oftentimes with the smaller MSP that could be the owner, who wants to be more cybersecurity focused. But I'd say with if you have a CISO internally, usually a CTO, a CISO, and they'll usually have the opening conversation with us, and then delegate the actual testing to one of their team members internally, who's probably testing, in transparency with us, usually testing two or three other tools at the same time, and then building a report for that CISO with benefits versus us versus competitors, strictly based on technology.
Very interesting. Yeah, I think that's similar to the folks that I've talked to too. 1 to 50 people. Um, they go to a lot of conferences, like the whole community. Very, very like, oh, I love to meet people type of mentality and personality. I love that. Like, I love going to conferences and meeting people too. And very like open to new tech forward. Not doesn't have to be tech savvy, but like, oh, there's something new I need to keep up because of these reasons, right? I can't fall behind. That sort of hustle mentality. So yeah, it's something I really appreciate working with this community. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and when I talked to like, so we were at ChannelCon in Vegas last week and had
Yes.
a lot of great conversations. And some owners were candid, like, hey, like I'm not even involved in the process of evaluating anymore. Like, I'll send you the person who does do this. But others, part of the conversation is like, hey, like even if you're not planning to implement this, it doesn't hurt to have someone come take a look for 20, 30 minutes to be knowledgeable about it because you're going after the same clients as the MSP down the street who might be selling themselves as the next, whether they are or not, like the next best thing because they have technology that other MSPs don't have. So I agree to
100%.
that.
I a couple questions. So for keeping up with cybersecurity news, and you mentioned you focus on compliance. That's especially right. Oh, we want to find out whenever there's some new compliance thing that I got to know about. Do you have any, how to phrase this? Do you have any cybersecurity concerns, things that keep you up at night, or news that you think, recent news that you think, oh, like folks should know about?
That's a good question. And I think this, like in terms of the educating MSPs and also end users, I think everyone always says like not to educate on fear. I'm always looking for news, and I've also learned too much. I've seen end users have to, and I'm sure the MSPs that are listening to will relate to this. I've seen too many times where people don't spend money until they feel pain through some type of an incident. So I try to look for compliance, like as we're learning this, like this NIST framework that everyone's trying to follow, right? When there's releases about kind of what that framework looks like, or and what I'm trying to allude to is like when there's every week, right? There's a big company, whether it's the government itself or hospitals that are shut down from a cyber event. I try not to send those out because I think we're all hearing it. We all know that those threats are real and that they're live and it's happening on a day-to-day basis. I look for like Gartner reports. I look for statistical data that says, okay, this is why this is where people are going and this is why. And for a SASE, so like where I think and talk about SASE is, like the enterprise went to cloud first, right? They were the first ones to adopt AWS. Then we went to Azure. Then over time, it's trickled its way down to the MSP segment, and I think it's the same thing for this whole space of cloud firewalls, VPN alternatives. We've seen the Fortune 500 really adopt this first with Zscaler and Palo Alto, and now kind of trickling down into these smaller client bases and finding the actual data around that. And not just a fear mongering article or an article saying this breach happened. This is why you need something. That's where I go to educate.
Mm.
Where I actually consume news, though, I read CRN. I'm on Reddit, Channel Futures. I do listen to, I scroll through YouTube, listening to leaders in the MSP space. I like getting my education from the MSPs themselves.
Absolutely, absolutely. I found this interesting. You said you try not to educate on fear. I'm curious to dig into that a little more. I understand what you prefer to do, right? You prefer to stick to the data, the facts, right? Here's actual, practical, actionable information, right? Here's the compliance issue, here's what you need to do to solve it. But stepping back, I'm curious about the philosophy in general. Uh, why is that not appealing to you?
I think because people don't like to be sold, right?
Hmm.
Bring data and say, this is why I'm bringing this to you for a reason. And this is A, B, C, D, right? And whether it's me as a vendor to the business or the business or the MSP to the business, the end users, or even as a consumer, whether someone's selling me a warranty at Best Buy when I'm walking out, I don't want to be sold on fear personally. I'd like to be sold as to based on those core those features themselves, that data itself. And unfortunately, if you learn the hard way, you do. But I'd rather be educated. This is why based on X, Y, Z. And I think a lot of buyers in general, whether businesses or consumers, have kind of also adopted that same mindset, which is also to some degree. I mean, I think people sell in fear because when you see like, hey, like these are the news events. I'd rather present like, hey, this is how many and these are how many customers in your who have the same type of businesses, same character, same profiles, right? So having same revenue, same amount of employees are getting attacked by these methods.
Yep.
This is how we can stop it proactively versus saying that guy down the street got attacked. Here's the news article around it. This is why we need to do that.
Hmm. Interesting. Just for fun, I'm gonna throw
Yeah.
in a little debate. So I actually, after some therapy, appreciate fear a little more now for me personally. It's I think it's if we think back to evolution and how fear helps us survive in the same sense when I think the way I think about it, fear helps a business survive or prevent breaches, or at least on a human emotional level. And to some extent, even at work, right, when we're professional, we have a human side to us that gets that responds to these emotions. Personally, and this might be bad of me to do it, but I 100%, I prefer to just facts, right? Facts, actionable, practical solutions, problems and solutions. I come from an engineering background, but these days I like to use the clickbait to get them to the facts, to sweeten the facts a little bit, to yeah, get them in through the door. But that's all. um, yeah. Um,
And And I agree, and I think but the buying persona. I think when you look at I think the company size and the individual in itself will really dictate this as well. And I think MSPs know their end
mm,
clients better than the vendors ever could. Where I think I'm sure like the dental office that has two dentists and 10 employees. That's when he or she is making a decision. That's a direct like that to spend more. That's directly coming out of their pocket. That's probably more of an emotional buying decision that maybe
mm,
fortunately fear is going to be the part that really the thing that really kicks that into gear versus the 250 person business that has a dedicated budget that is really just are we taking it from what allotment. So I think to that this whole conversation of selling on fear, I think depending on the buying persona, it might resonate more or less based
yeah.
on some of those.
Yeah. It's nuance. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Um, so you mentioned something earlier where, the way that you talk to your MSPs is you want to get ahead of this. You want to be proactive and not reactive. You want to get the security in place before there's a breach, before something happens. With a lot of the MSPs that I've spoken to, I think they feel the same thing when they talk to their clients. They're talking to their clients like, hey, you want to put this in place. You want to, hire us and be proactive, not reactive, and do prevention. Otherwise, when there's a breach, it costs so much more than just paying a little bit every month. So I'm curious, how does that message, when you talk to MSPs, does that resonate? Because I feel like that's the same messaging that the MSPs, give to their clients.
I say for the most part it does. I think a lot of MSP.
Mm,
I think the channels, which I've watched the channel evolve over a short. Like I went, there's people who've been in this industry in the channel for 30 years, right? And I have a 6 year tenure here, and I feel like I've learned a lot in this time, and I've also seen so much change in this 6 year span, right? Like the migration to cloud, changes in networking, changes of when I first started, compliance is not something I was talked about every day. So to answer that, I think yes, now more than 2 3 years ago when I was working for a different company in terms of wanting to stay ahead, knowing that they have to. Also, just from a sheer competitive standpoint, I think the MSPs listening will be there's a lot of fear of losing business or the guy down the street going and saying, I could either do this for cheaper or I can do this better. And being able to speak to these, to the industry trends earlier on is, I feel like and the best way to put it, I feel like MSPs are aware that they need to speak to the 2023 landscape.
yep.
Like you don't want to go to a mechanic that can tell you that he can fix a car from 2019, but can't do it for 2023's model. I
Uh-huh.
think a lot of them carry that same mindset on a day-to-day basis. Just finding the time is naturally the hardest part to do it. Hardest
Yep.
part to the equation.
100%. Wait, so you mentioned 30 years. Did you say you have 30 years of experience?
A lot of people I speak to have 30
MSPs.
years of
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. I'm curious to learn a little bit more about your personal journey here. What got you into IT, cybersecurity, technology? What excites you about this field? Why here? Yeah, what got you in?
So I love telling the story because it would happen totally by accident, and I think a lot of people can relate to that in their own professions.
Yeah.
I was working in a totally different industry, in a sales related world focus, and I live in New York, and I was on the way to a Yankee game with a couple of buddies, and it was just a summer day, and a gentleman was sitting across from me on the train, and we just struck up a random conversation. He was talking to me and my two friends, and we got dropped off at Yankee Stadium, and we're saying goodbye. And he pulled me aside and was like, "Hey, I think you'd be a really good fit for my company." And I was like, "I'm happy with what I'm doing, but I appreciate it." And he gave me his card, and he was the head of sales globally for Datto at the time, and I didn't even know what Datto was, let alone really kind of anything about the MSP channel. And 6 months later, I had a tiring day. One of those days where kind of like, damn, like, and I was like, I'm gonna email this guy and see kind of what he's cool. Let's see what this is all about. I went on the website and I was like, oh wow. And I went into Data's offices and was blown away and was gracious enough to, I'm grateful to be offered a job to work there. And I started with Datto, and that was my entrance into the MSP space. And what I loved about that onboarding journey there was, before learning anything about the technology, like the first like month or so is really like learn about MSPs, understand at least as much as you can. Read online, go on CRN, talk to the shadow calls, but like understand what is their day to day, who are they, and who is it, like who and what is this channel, and then let's talk about the technology. And how this is going to, again, also enable and better and support MSPs, and regardless of anyone feels about any particular vendor or customer, or in the marketplace, I think they did a really good job of portraying MSP first.
Wow, very, very cool. I think you're also very good at storytelling. I wonder if that was a reason why he gave you the card on the train. And wow, that sounds like a story from a movie. You're going to a Yankees game on a summer day, and the guy just gave you a card after getting off the train. So I'm curious, given your journey, what's the most important thing you learned in your career? And it could be, something that you sort of hit and then overcame yourself, or maybe some advice that somebody else provided you, or yeah, from your experience.
That's a good question. And I think resilience ultimately,
Mm.
having, I think goals without creating a path to get there is almost, it's impossible. You need to have that path to get there, and having that persistence to kind of keep going. And not every day is going to be a good day, no matter what you're doing. Um, and never really losing focus of that, and kind of shrinking that even down further is like, what defines a good day and what defines a bad day. So setting small goals in the beginning of the day, like, okay, like first starting at Timis a few months ago, and really kind of building out processes and really starting from the ground up, was it wasn't about revenue, it wasn't about partnerships, but like, what constitutes a good day? Like, did I have some good conversations here? Did I maybe hire someone who seems like a good fit? And really building on that success. And I think simply like put, when you're having a bad day, being able to shake it off in the morning and can start your day with a smile. But
Wow.
overall, resilience and persistence
I
was.
think that's something that everybody can relate to, whether it's MSPs who, business owners, right? That resilience that you have to have as an MSP, or the end client business owners, right? Uh, wow, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So that's the end of the podcast. Feel free. Do you have a plug? Who should reach out to you? What's the best way to reach you? Go for it, Jared.
Yeah, so I don't want to make this a sales pitch, because so if I'm not gonna end it with that. Look, Timis Networks, we're MSP only. We only want to work with MSPs. We're looking for partners. So if you want to learn about the SASE space, you have one right now, and you want to learn about what other MSPs are evaluating, reach out to us. We're happy to do a demo. We want to give NFRs. We want your hands on the tool. We want feedback. We can't get better without your feedback. You are our customers. You are our mouthpieces. So if you have any interest in engaging with myself on any variety of topics, um, please reach out to me. My email is jared.epstein@timisnetworks.com, and you could find me on LinkedIn, and it's Jared Epstein. I do really appreciate you bringing me on today, Jeremy.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also want to end with thanking MSPs.
Mhm.
Even though I was brought into this channel via a train ticket on the way to a Yankee game, MSPs have gotten me where I am today, and I've learned a lot about myself and about the world from some of my MSP partners, who I continue to talk to, even if I'm not working with them on a day-to-day basis. So thank you to the channel. It's a great.
Absolutely. And I'm going to take a page out of your book, Jared, because I was going to end this with a sales pitch, but I'm not. So I just want to say, hey, if you're an MSP, if you have an existing sales process of winning clients, and if that process includes risk assessments, or you want it to include risk assessments, or you want to learn why risk assessments are so crucial to winning clients. And maybe you're doing it manually. Maybe you're spending a whole week on it. Maybe you're spending a whole month on it, and you don't even get results until you have to do the pitch and the demo to your client. If that's a pain point for you, come talk to us. We solve that problem for all of our MSPs. So we'd love to chat, learn about your sales process, learn about your needs, and see if we can help. So thank you, Jarrett, for teaching me, for sharing your wisdom, for sharing your approach to your work, and yeah, your learnings and your journey. And I love the Yankee Stadium story.
I appreciate that. Thanks for having me on, Jeremy.
Thank you so much. See you all next time. Thank you.